They clapped so hard the chandelier trembled. It was the kind of applause that swallows a room, the kind you'd expect for someone saving lives or walking on the moon, not for a corporate promotion. But there she was, standing on the elevated stage in her midnight blue gown, flawless as always, soaking in every second. And me? I was still handing my coat to the concierge. No one waited for me to arrive. No one even noticed. There were no eyes scanning the door, no texts saying, "Where are you?" Only the echo of people cheering for my wife and the unsettling realization that I was a spectator at my own marriage. I don't remember walking into the ballroom. I just remember standing behind a tall floral arrangement, staring at the back of her head while she gave her victory speech. She said words like resilience, individual excellence, self-made, and thank you to the incredible team who believed in me. The team, the mentors, the brand, the board, even her old manager from 3 cities ago. Everyone got a nod except me. She never said my name. You'd think that would hurt the most, but it wasn't. It was what happened after. As the crowd moved to congratulate her, I stepped forward, one hand raised halfway in greeting. She looked me dead in the eyes, then leaned in to kiss some guy on the cheek, a guy I'd never seen before. He handed her a gold-embossed envelope, whispered something that made her laugh, and she touched his wrist like I wasn't even there. I took a step back, then another. I turned toward the bar thinking maybe I could just blend in. Maybe this was one of those situations where you wait for a quiet moment to reset the tone. But every moment after that just confirmed it. She didn't want me there. A colleague walked by and actually said, "Sorry, this area is reserved for leadership." I looked down. I was holding a gift bag with her initials on it. I had made her a photo timeline of her journey. Every late night, every job interview, even the day she cried when she got rejected from her first firm. But I realized none of those things lived in this room anymore. In this version of her life, I didn't exist. I wish I could say I stayed for the dinner or at least made my presence known, but I didn't. I walked back out before the first toast. No confrontation, no anger. Just a quiet exit through the side hall where the hotel staff was wheeling out a dessert cart. It was in that silent corridor somewhere between the clink of champagne glasses and the hum of industrial refrigerators that I felt something snap. Not loudly, not violently, just a gentle realization. I wasn't part of her story anymore, and maybe I hadn't been for a long time. I didn't drive straight home after I left the party. I didn't have a destination at all. I just kept going past downtown, past the freeway signs, past the late-night gas stations where people still look each other in the eyes. At some point, I ended up in a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, the kind with flickering neon and vinyl booths that creak when you shift your weight. I ordered a slice of cherry pie and a cup of coffee, not because I wanted either, but because I needed something to anchor myself, something that wasn't applause meant for someone who had clearly moved on from me. The waitress called me Han, which almost broke me. I took out my phone. I had one text from my wife, 3 words. "You left early." No question mark, no concern. Number. "Where are you?" I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then I opened my gallery and scrolled through old photos. Vacations, birthdays, Tuesday dinners. Her head on my shoulder, my hand on her back. Us laughing over pancakes at 10 p.m. I couldn't remember the last time we laughed like that. I couldn't even remember the last time she reached for my hand. What changed? No, I knew what changed. The better question was when. There was a moment, maybe 2 years ago, when she stopped waiting up for me. I'd come home from my freelance contracts or late-night debugging marathons, and She'd be asleep on the couch with her laptop open and wine glass half full. I told myself it was work stress. Then, when I brought it up, she said I was being too emotional. "You always read into things," she told me once, brushing me off like I was a speck on her sleeve. I swallowed that like everything else. But at the party, that wasn't stress. That wasn't work. That was deliberate. It was a world where I didn't belong anymore, and what made it worse was how comfortable she was in it. The next morning, I tried to pretend nothing happened. Habit is a hard thing to kill. I made coffee, fed the cat, even folded the throw blanket she always leaves crumpled on the couch. When she came downstairs in her robe, holding her phone like it was more important than the conversation she hadn't started with me yet, she barely looked up. "You never answered my text," she said casually, pouring herself oat milk. "I didn't think it deserved an answer," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. She paused. That was rare. I become so easy to ignore that even resistance surprised her. "Don't be dramatic, Caven," she muttered, walking past me. "It was a work party. Not everything's about you." There it was. The line I've been handed a dozen different ways over the years. Only now it landed differently, heavier, more final, like she was already halfway out the door emotionally, and I was the one too stubborn to admit it. "You didn't mention me in your speech," I said quietly. She laughed. Actually laughed, Kevin. It wasn't a wedding toast. That was her answer. That was how small I'd become. Not worth 30 seconds in a 2-minute speech. Not worth acknowledgement in a room full of people who'd never once heard my name. So I said nothing more. I took my coat off the hook by the door, not because I was leaving, but because I needed the weight of it in my hands to ground myself. I stood there while she took a call from someone named Jordan, talking about investor outreach and campaign deadlines. Her voice suddenly full of life again, just not the kind she shared with me. And while she spoke, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my laptop and created a folder. I named it What She Doesn't See. Inside, I started documenting everything. Not to expose her, not to shame her, but because I needed to see what was left of me. I'm not proud of it, but I started observing her like a stranger would. Not as a husband, not as someone emotionally entangled, but as someone studying the decay of something once beautiful. I didn't mean to turn into a ghost with a notebook, but I did. That folder on my laptop, What She Doesn't See, slowly filled with screenshots, voice memos, notes to myself, little pieces of silence that she left behind. And the more I looked, the more I realized I had been living inside a story that had quietly ended without me. That following week, I kept trying to talk myself out of what I felt. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that not all marriages are romantic every day, that people grow apart and then grow back together, that we were just in a phase, a difficult one. But the truth, that kind of hope only lives in people who haven't been slowly erased yet. Tuesday night, I made dinner shrimp risotto the way she used to like it when she still said things like, "I missed you today." She didn't come home until almost 10:40 p.m. No call, no explanation, just a cold shrug when I asked if everything was okay. "I got drinks with the team," she said flatly, kicking off her heels without telling me. I asked. I wasn't trying to accuse her. I was trying to connect. I think part of me still wanted her to notice I was hurting. "Oh God, don't make this a thing." She snapped. "You act like I need permission to live my life." I blinked. "No, just maybe a courtesy, a text." She rolled her eyes, grabbed a bottle of wine, and disappeared into her office. Not a single word about the food. It sat on the counter all night until I scraped it into the trash at 1 a.m. The next morning, I tried not to resent her. I really tried. But something shifted again. Subtly, quietly, but permanently. started looking through our house differently. Every frame photo felt staged. Every decorative pillow she insisted on arranging just so felt performative. Even the wedding album on the bookshelf, once proudly displayed, now felt like it belonged to strangers I barely recognized. On Thursday, I found a receipt in the laundry. Not hidden, not folded, just crumpled in the pocket of her blazer. It was from some rooftop bar I'd never heard of, with a charge for 2 espresso martinis and an entree named after someone called Reed. I didn't know what bothered me more, the fact that I wasn't invited, or the idea that she didn't even care if I found it. She knew I did laundry. She knew I'd see it. That kind of carelessness only grows in people who believe they won't be questioned. I Googled the place. Swanky, modern, the kind of venue with low lighting and overpriced drinks. Definitely not where you casually hang out with coworkers. I hovered over the reservation number on the receipt. Something in me itched to call and ask who made it, but I didn't because I already knew the answer. Instead, I took a walk. I walked through our neighborhood like I was seeing it for the first time. Every porch light, every cracked sidewalk, every hedge felt like it belonged to someone else's reality. I passed the park bench where we once ate ice cream on a hot July afternoon, her head leaning on my shoulder. I stopped there, sat down, and cried. Yeah, I know. Grown man crying in public. But grief doesn't care about dignity. It just takes you. When I finally came home, she was already asleep, or pretending to be. I watched her back rise and fall in the dim light for a long time. I whispered, "Are you happy?" into the silence, not expecting an answer, just trying to see if the truth would echo. It didn't. The next morning, she left early for another team off-site. She didn't say goodbye, didn't even take the coffee I poured for her. And as the door closed behind her, I stared at the space she just vacated and realized something painfully clear. She wasn't cheating on me with a person. She was cheating on me with a version of herself I didn't belong to. And the scariest part, she didn't miss me in that new version at all. The house felt bigger without her in it. Not because it was physically large. We live in a modest 2-bedroom with creaky floorboards and a kitchen that still smells faintly of burnt toast from last year's Christmas. But because the silence stretched, it wrapped itself around the corners and stared at me from every surface. I used to like the quiet. It gave me room to think, to write, to be. But now, it just sounded like someone was missing. Someone who didn't plan on coming back. After she left for that so-called off-site, I did something I hadn't done in years. I walked into her home office. Not snooping, not invading, just looking, seeking traces of her that still had my name on them. But it was like stepping into a rental property. Neutral, cold, efficient. The shelves were lined with marketing books and framed leadership awards. No photos. Not one of us. Not even the goofy one from our trip to Yosemite where we both got sunburned and laughed so hard we forgot we were lost. I sat at her desk and glanced at her calendar on the screen. Her laptop was asleep, not locked. My fingers hovered. I know I shouldn't have. But when you're losing someone quietly, your morals blur into survival. Her Thursday was labeled Team Dinner, Vesper Lounge. Friday, Strategy Sync with Reed. There it was again. Reed. Not a name I recognized. Definitely not someone she'd ever brought up at home. I opened her messages. I didn't have to dig far. They weren't even hidden. Reed, last night was something else. You looked incredible. Dangerous even. Mara, stop it. You'll make me blush during my meeting. Reed, too bad I'm not there to see it. Mara, patience, stranger. Friday's almost here. My stomach dropped. It was surreal. Like watching a movie where you know the ending but still hope the twist never comes. Except This was my wife, and she was talking to another man like I didn't exist. Like the love we once shared had been cleared from her hard drive to make room for newer, flashier apps. I took screenshots again, not for revenge, not even for proof, just so I wouldn't gaslight myself later into thinking I imagined it. That folder on my laptop, it was growing faster than I could process. I closed the screen and walked out of the room like it had caught fire. Later that evening, she came home humming. She actually hummed. I watched from the kitchen doorway as she kicked off her shoes and loosened her ponytail like she was in a movie montage. For a second, she looked like the girl I fell in love with, the one who used to dance in the living room barefoot, the one who once whispered, "I hope I never forget what your voice sounds like when you're sleepy." I wanted to scream, to ask who Reed was, to throw the laptop on the floor and shout, "How could you?" But I didn't, because the worst kind of betrayal isn't loud. It's the one that dares you to stay silent, the kind that makes you question your own worth before you ever question their actions. So I played it cool. "You're home early," I said, pretending to stir pasta sauce that I knew she wouldn't touch. She glanced at the clock. Didn't feel like staying out. Long day. I nodded, wondering how many lies can fit into 5 words. The next morning was Saturday. I woke up to find her on the phone in the hallway. She didn't see me in the kitchen. She didn't hear me step out for water, but I heard her voice. Soft, laughing, intimate. "No, he has no idea," she said, pacing in front of the guest room door. "He's just comfortable, predictable. He thinks I'm still his." Then a pause, a giggle. "Reed, stop. You're so bad." I dropped my glass. It shattered. She froze for a long second. Everything stood still. The water spread across the tile like the truth had finally leaked out. "Oh," she said, trying to smile. "You scared me." I said nothing, just looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time I saw it. Not guilt, not fear, not remorse. Relief. She was relieved because now the pretending could end. Now the part of her that had been balancing 2 lives didn't have to. "I'm going for a walk," I said, stepping around the glass. My voice cracked, but not enough to count as emotion. I didn't take my phone. I didn't take my keys. I just walked, and somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd block I realized I had no idea what came next. All I knew was this. She had already moved on, and I hadn't even started. I kept walking long after my legs started to ache. Past the neighborhood park where we once took Sunday walks with hot coffees, past the corner bakery that still had our initials carved into the bench out front, faded but stubborn. I even passed by the church we never went into but once joked about renewing our vows in. Everything I saw was a ghost of what used to be, just like me. I ended up at a motel, the kind people don't talk about. Peeling paint, buzzing fluorescent lights, a vending machine with stale crackers. I paid cash for a room without asking why I was doing it. The clerk didn't even blink. I sat on the stiff mattress, hands in my lap, staring at the wall, not thinking, just existing. It wasn't a plan. It was a pause. I spent the night there, not sleeping, just waiting for morning like it might have something different to say. It didn't. The sun rose, the sky turned gray, and I was still the same man with a ring on his finger and no idea what that meant anymore. I went back home late the next afternoon. I half expected the locks to be changed. But no, she hadn't even noticed I was gone. The same jacket was draped over the chair. The same empty wine glass sat on the counter. And Mara. She was in the backyard watering the rosemary like we were still a couple who planned meals together. She looked up as I walked through the sliding door. "Where have you been?" I stood still, not answering. "Kevin?" she asked again, this time sharper. I finally said, "Do you love him?" She didn't flinch, didn't play dumb. She only stared for a long beat and then said, "It's not that simple." That sentence broke something in me. Not because she didn't say yes, not even because she didn't deny it, but because it confirmed what I feared the most. I had become simple, predictable, safe, a placeholder in her life story. I didn't ask if it was simple, I said. I asked if you love him. She crossed her arms. "You don't get to act righteous now. You've been emotionally gone for years." I actually laughed. "You think I left first? Mara, I've been trying to reach you while you've been orbiting some new version of yourself." She turned away, frustrated. "I don't owe you an explanation." "No," I said quietly. "You owe me the truth. That night, we didn't fight. We didn't cry. We just existed in opposite corners of a house that now felt like neutral ground. I slept on the couch, my head against a pillow that smelled like a detergent I didn't recognize. Maybe that's what betrayal smells like. Citrus and strangers. The next day I did something I never thought I would. I took off my ring. Not with drama, not in front of her. I did it in the bathroom quietly while brushing my teeth. I looked at my reflection and thought, you were no one's second option. I placed the ring on the edge of the sink. It sat there small and still like a relic from a religion I no longer practiced. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't leave a note. I just walked out and started driving without a destination again. The difference this time, I didn't feel like I was running away. I felt like I was finally walking towards something. I stayed at a friend's place that night. Paul. We hadn't talked in months, maybe years, but when he opened the door and saw my face, he just nodded and said, "I've got beer and clean sheets." That's the thing about old friends. They don't need the full story. They just make space for the pieces. I didn't tell him everything, not yet, but I said enough. Later, after he fell asleep in the recliner, I sat out on the porch and stared at the sky. The stars were faint, the air cold, but I breathed deeper than I had in weeks. I didn't know where my marriage stood. I didn't know who Marlo was anymore, but I knew who I wasn't. I wasn't the man waiting for crumbs. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was curious about what came next. The thing about waking up in someone else's home is that it hits you fast. Your feet hit cold tile. The ceiling fan hums at a different pitch. Even the scent in the air feels borrowed. Paul had left a sticky note on the fridge that just said, "Stay as long as you need." Eggs in the fridge. Don't be a stranger again. I stared at it for a while, unsure how something so simple could feel so profound. Maybe it was the first time in weeks someone offered me kindness without condition or confusion. I didn't go to work that day. I couldn't focus on numbers and code when my entire reality felt like a corrupted file. Instead, I walked through downtown, my phone buzzing every now and then, messages from Mara that I didn't open. Not out of spite, but because I couldn't stomach watching her do damage control while I was still pulling the knife out of my chest. By late afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the most recent message. It read, "We should talk. Please come home. I didn't want to hurt you." I nearly laughed out loud. Didn't want to hurt me. I wanted to text her back. Then why did you invite someone else into the space where I was still breathing but I didn't? Because there was no version of that message that would make her feel what I was feeling. And I was tired of narrating my pain for someone who stopped reading. Instead, I did something selfish. Or maybe it was finally something honest. I drove to her office. I didn't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe evidence of who she had become. Maybe I wanted to see her in her element, her throne room, where she was still pretending to be the woman who made toasts and forgot husbands. I told the receptionist I was there to drop something off, and she let me in without question. I guess being the nobody husband has its perks. No suspicion, no attention. I stood by the frosted glass wall outside the conference room where a team meeting was in progress. And there she was, laughing, smiling, leaning slightly toward the man beside her, Reed. I assumed they looked like co-stars in a drama I hadn't been cast in. At one point, he touched her elbow gently as she passed him the laptop cord, and she smiled in that slow, secret way I hadn't seen in years. The kind of smile that used to belong to me. That used to happen after whispered inside jokes in the grocery store. That used to say, "I see you." She hadn't smiled at me like that in a long, long time. I turned and walked out before anyone noticed. My hands were shaking, not with rage, but with this quiet, devastating understanding. I wasn't just losing her. I had already lost her. I'd been fighting to save a version of her that didn't exist anymore. I had become a memory she hadn't officially deleted, but had long since stopped accessing. Back at Paul's, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at myself like a stranger. My eyes were bloodshot, my jawline softer than it used to be. I'd stopped taking care of myself sometime around the third year of her career liftoff. While she climbed ladders, I held the base steady. I told myself that was love. That sacrifice was part of the deal. But love doesn't forget the hand that held it steady. That night, I took out an old notebook I hadn't used since college. I flipped to a clean page and wrote at the top, "Who is Caven without her?" It sat there like a dare. Below it, I started making a list, not of goals, not of tasks, just fragments, thoughts, things I had missed, things I wanted again, like laughing without apologizing, cooking for someone who tastes first, critiques later, going a full day without feeling invisible, hearing my name in someone else's story, being chosen, not tolerated. I stared at the list until the ink dried and bled through the paper. I hadn't felt this kind of clarity in years, not in the noise of our routines, not in the half-kisses or the polite dinners or the good nights that never really meant anything. This list felt like the beginning of a person I used to be before I molded myself into what she needed. The next morning, I texted her 2 words. I know. No context, no accusations. Just the weight of the truth finally spoken aloud. She replied a few minutes later. Please, let's not end like this. But the truth is, we ended a long time ago. This was just the last echo fading out of a room that had already emptied itself. Still, I wasn't done yet. Because if I was going to walk away, I needed to make sure she knew exactly what she had broken. And not just with words. I didn't respond to her last message. Let's not end like this. What does that even mean when you've already burned the middle to the ground? When you don't name someone in your victory speech. When you laugh at your husband from across the ballroom while standing next to the man you replaced him with. That's how it ends. Not with paperwork, not with screaming, with neglect, with omission, with slow erasure. Still, I wasn't ready to disappear without leaving something behind. I went home that Sunday afternoon, not because I missed her, but because I wanted to stand in that house one last time as myself, not as the man she reshaped, not as the convenient ghost haunting her comfort zone, but as the version of Caven who deserved better. She wasn't there when I arrived. Her car was gone, and I didn't care where she went. I walked into our bedroom first. It was neat, curated, like a showroom pretending to be a marriage. The bed was made with tight corners, not a single wrinkle in the duvet. Her nightstand had a hardcover novel she'd never finish and a moisturizer she always left the cap off of. My side empty, as if I had never existed. The drawer where I used to keep notes she wrote me, those little sticky love letters she'd leave on my coffee mug or steering wheel, was now filled with receipts and headphones. I pulled my ring from my pocket. I hadn't worn it since that night in the motel. I placed it gently on her pillow. Then I went to the living room and placed the printed photos I'd dug up. The Yosemite trip. The first Christmas in this house. The ridiculous one of us holding matching ice cream cones in November in a neat stack on the coffee table with a yellow sticky note on top. You don't need these anymore. But I do. I walked through the house slowly, collecting the few things that were still mine. A sweater she never liked. A book I loved that she once called too slow. A mug with a cracked handle that somehow never broke. I didn't take much, because truthfully I didn't need to. I wasn't reclaiming objects. I was reclaiming myself. The last thing I did before leaving was sit at her desk. The laptop was closed this time, but that didn't matter. I didn't need more proof. I just wanted her to see something when she came back. I left a single message on a notepad app written in bold letters. I hope Reed remembers the name of your favorite flower. I hope he stays when you're not shining. I hope he listens when you're not performing. Because I did, and you didn't see me. Goodbye. Then I left the house key beside the message. I closed the door softly behind me. No slamming, no melodrama, just finality. I stayed with Paul another night. I didn't cry. I didn't even replay the arguments we never had. I sat on his porch, drank cold coffee, and watched the neighbor's wind chime twist in the wind. That silence, the real kind, not the one I'd been drowning in back home, felt oddly warm. The next day, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered without thinking. It was Mara. Her voice was quiet but not broken, not the way I hoped it might be. I read your message, she said. I didn't respond. I didn't think you'd actually leave, she added. Of course you didn't, I said. That's the problem. A long pause. I didn't mean for things to happen like this. Things don't happen, Mara, I said. People make choices, and you made yours every day. You ignored me, erased me, and replaced me. She started to cry, soft and restrained. I stayed silent. I don't know what to do now, she whispered, and for the first time in years I didn't feel the urge to rescue her. That's not my problem anymore, I said, then hung up. The weight didn't lift instantly. This wasn't one of those cheesy movie moments where the protagonist finds enlightenment on a mountaintop and everything makes sense. No, it was still messy, still raw, but it was mine. Now, the next morning, I booked a short trip out of town. Nothing big, just a cabin near the coast. No Wi-Fi, no mirrors, just space to remember what my voice sounds like when no one's interrupting it. I packed light and left early, the sun barely peeking through the fog. As I drove past the city limits, I didn't look back. And that's when I knew I hadn't just left her. I had finally found me. The cabin wasn't glamorous. No polished countertops, no curated succulents, no startup brochures on the coffee table bragging about how to optimize your lifestyle. Just 4 walls of aged wood, the gentle creak of the floor beneath my steps, and a window that overlooked the cliffs like it had nothing left to prove. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small inside a space. I felt exactly the size I was meant to be. The first night, I sat by the fire and said nothing. I didn't write, didn't text, didn't open social media. I just listened to the wind shuffle through the trees and the distant crash of waves against the rocks below. You don't realize how much noise you've adapted to until you finally sit in real silence. The kind that doesn't demand your attention, just offers it. I woke up the next morning and took a walk down the narrow path behind the cabin. It led to a clearing with a rusted bench and an endless view of the ocean. I stood there, the wind biting my cheeks, and took the deepest breath I'd taken in years. Not out of pain, not out of grief, out of permission. I was finally allowing myself to exhale. Over the next few days, I started doing small things again, meaningful things. I wrote in my notebook every morning, thoughts, memories, bits of dialogue that weren't meant for anyone but me. I made simple meals that filled the cabin with warmth. I even picked up a brush and tried painting for the first time since college. It looked terrible. I didn't care. And the dreams, they changed too. I stopped dreaming about Reed, about Mara's cold laughter, or those empty toasts made in crowded rooms. I started dreaming of peace, of younger versions of myself who used to believe in quiet joy, in building, not fixing, in being, not proving. On the fourth morning, I found a letter slipped under the cabin door. No postage, just my name and handwriting I hadn't seen in years. My mother's. I hadn't told her where I was, but somehow she knew. The letter didn't ask questions, it didn't prod, it just said, "You were always enough, even when someone forgot to remind you. Come home when you're ready. We'll leave the porch light on." I cried not like before, not with desperation or heartbreak. I cried because someone still saw me, someone who never needed a reason to. That afternoon I packed my things, but not out of urgency. I was simply ready to return, not to Mara, not to that house, but to the world that still had room for me. I wasn't going back to the version of life I'd left behind. I was stepping into something new, something entirely mine. 2 weeks later, I moved into a small rental near the lake. Quiet, sunlit, full of potential. Paul helped me carry in the furniture. My mom stocked the fridge with too much soup. And me, I started living again. Not in grand declarations, but in small, beautiful decisions. I joined a local writers group. I started jogging in the mornings. I even reconnected with Liana, an old friend from college who had once said I had a kind soul and eyes that carried stories. We talk every day now, nothing forced, just two people meeting each other where they are. And for once, I'm not performing. I'm just me. I won't pretend the past didn't happen. It did. It broke me. But it also revealed me, because here's what I know now. Sometimes the people who forget your name in a room full of applause are the ones who never really knew how to say it with meaning. And sometimes walking away isn't the end of the story. Sometimes it's the first time you step into the light. So if you're reading this, and you feel like a background character in your own life, please hear me. You are not invisible. You are not simple. You are not just anything. You are someone worth starting over for. I was, and I